it's a weirdly specific feeling to sit down on a Friday night, fire up a streaming service, and realize you have 10,000 movies right at your fingertips.
Oh, the classic Friday night paralysis.
Right. I mean, you technically have access to more cinematic history than any human being before you, so what do you actually do?
You spend 45 minutes just endlessly scrolling through thumbnails.
Exactly. You scroll, you feel this creeping sense of exhaustion, and ultimately you just turn the TV off and watch absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it is really the defining paradox of modern life. We operate under this core assumption that what we want, what we need to be happy, really is total freedom.
Right. Infinite options.
But when we actually get it, we just freeze.
And that freeze is exactly what we're unpacking in today's deep dive. Because if you were listening to this, chances are you have, by most modern standards anyway, made it.
Yeah.
You might be a successful professional, maybe a digital nomad, a high earner. You probably have incredible flexibility in where you work, what you buy, how you structure your days.
Which sounds like the dream.
Right. It sounds perfect. And yet, there is a very good chance you often feel completely paralyzed, overwhelmed, or just quietly burnt out.
Which makes perfect biological and psychological sense, honestly. Today, we're exploring the psychology of choice overload. We're going to dive deep into why having infinite options is actually a recipe for misery, and more importantly, how to systematically reclaim your sanity.
By basically deliberately restricting your own freedom, right?
Exactly.
But before we start complaining about how hard it is to pick a movie or a career path, we should probably acknowledge the elephant in the room here.
The privilege aspect.
Yeah. Having options is a massive privilege. We really have to steelman the counter-argument here because researchers like Barry Schwartz in The Paradox of Choice, they are very clear on this. When people have absolutely no choice in their lives, their existence is almost unbearable.
There is a crucial baseline to establish.
Right, like historically marginalized groups or people living in severe poverty, they dream of having the exact optionality that we're sitting here talking about today.
They do. We're absolutely talking about a luxury problem. But, and this is a big but, we have to understand that it is a luxury problem that human biology is fundamentally not equipped to handle.
Okay, so the brain just isn't built for it.
Not at all. I mean, look at the data. Over a recent 30-year period, the gross domestic product of the U.S. more than doubled. Consumer options absolutely exploded. We went from a few staples to grocery store stocking, like 273 different versions of cereal.
Which is just absurd.
It is. And yet, during that exact same period, the number of Americans describing themselves as very happy dropped by 14 million.
Wow. 14 million. And clinical depression skyrocketed right alongside that economic growth.
Exactly.
Actually, there was this fascinating poll done by the New York Times and CBS looking at affluent teenagers. These are kids with every conceivable advantage, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And 50% of them reported that their lives were harder than their parents' lives were. Not because of material lack, but because of the pressure of what they call too muchness.
Too muchness. That's such a great term for it.
Yeah, it's this constant crushing fear of falling behind. Because when you have every opportunity in the world, the subconscious narrative is that if you fail, or if you're just unhappy, well, it is entirely your fault.
That's a heavy burden. And that pressure of too muchness translates directly into how our brains process decisions, even incredibly low-stakes ones.
Like buying groceries.
Right. You've probably heard of the famous JAM study by behavioral economists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper.
Oh, yeah, the classic marketing example.
Exactly. They set up a tasting booth. One day, they put out 24 varieties of jam. Another day, they displayed just 6.
And the outcome is just legendary. The massive 24 jam display attracted a lot of foot traffic, right? Like 60% of shoppers stopped.
But only 3% of those people actually bought a jar.
3%.
Yeah.
But when they put out just 6 jams, fewer people stopped to look, but 30% of them made a purchase.
It's crazy. That is a 10-fold increase in conversion just by hiding 18 options.
And there's the pen study too, right?
Yeah, you see the exact same mechanic. Researchers found that 75% of people will happily take a nice $2 metal pen over $1.50 in cash.
Which makes sense. It's a good deal.
It is.
Yeah.
But if you offer them the cash, the metal pen, and a third option like a pair of felt-tip pens, the choice paralysis kicks in.
Right.
Add that third option, and fewer than 50% of people take any pen at all. They just take the cash and walk away.
Okay, let's pause on that because rationally this makes zero sense.
It really doesn't.
If I know I don't want the felt tip pens, Why do I suddenly not want the metal pen either?
Mhm.
Why does my brain short circuit just because a few extra items are sitting on the shelf? I should just be able to ignore them.
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is the sheer biological limit of our neuroscience.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for complex decision-making and executive function, runs on glucose. It is a finite, literal, physical resource. Every single time you weigh one option against another, even if it's just strawberry versus boysenberry jam, you are literally burning fuel.
So I'm draining my brain's battery just by looking at the shelf.
Exactly. And on top of that, your working memory can only hold about 7 items at once, plus or minus 2.
Okay, so staring at 24 jams.
You exceed that hard biological cap immediately, and when you do that, your brain's amygdala gets involved.
The amygdala, isn't that the threat detection center?
Yes, your primitive threat detection center. It interprets this cognitive overload not as a minor modern inconvenience, but as a literal biological threat. It triggers an anxiety response.
Oh, wow.
Your heart rate goes up, stress hormones are released, you're experiencing the physiological equivalent of being hunted, all because your brain cannot process the data in front of it.
Which perfectly explains the streaming service paralysis. You're burning through all your prefrontal cortex glucose just reading the titles. By the time you actually need to make a decision, you are running on empty and your amygdala is screaming at you that you're in danger, so you shut the TV off to escape the threat.
Precisely. It's a flight response.
Yeah.
And because our brains have this hard biological limit, the specific coping mechanisms we develop for decision-making completely dictate our mental health.
Right, and this is where Barry Schwartz identifies those two distinct personality profiles, isn't it? The satisficers and the maximizers.
That's right.
So a satisficer is someone who establishes a criteria for what is good enough. Like the moment they find an option that meets those standards, they pick it and move on.
They don't look back.
But a maximizer, on the other hand, is an exhaustive searcher. They have to examine every single option to guarantee they are getting the absolute best possible outcome.
Right, and the brutal paradox of the maximizer is that they objectively get better outcomes.
Wait, they do?
They do. They find the slightly better deals, they negotiate higher starting salaries, but they feel subjectively much worse about them. The data shows maximizers are prime candidates for depression.
But why? If they are actually getting the better job or the better car, shouldn't they be happier?
It comes down to the psychology of opportunity costs. Every time you look at an alternative, you create an opportunity cost.
Okay.
There was a brilliant study done using magazine subscriptions in Florida. When people evaluated magazines as a group, they actually valued the individual magazines less than when they evaluated them in isolation.
Oh, this is loss aversion in action.
Exactly.
Kahneman and Tversky proved that losing something hurts us fundamentally more than gaining something feels good, right?
Spot on.
So if I'm looking at 3 great magazines and I pick one, I'm feeling the loss of the specific features from the 2 I rejected. The psychological sting of what I gave up actually overpowers the joy of what I got.
That's exactly it. And this ties deeply into sunk costs, too. There's a famous study looking at theater tickets.
Oh, I think I know this one.
Yeah. People who paid full price for a season pass attended significantly more plays than people who were given a random discount. They didn't enjoy the plays more, though.
They just felt compelled to go.
Right. They just couldn't handle the regret of feeling like they wasted a larger financial investment. They were terrified of the psychological loss.
And even when the maximizer does navigate all of that and finds the absolute perfect thing, it doesn't last anyway, right? Because of hedonic adaptation.
Yes, we get used to the best incredibly quickly.
Like that classic Brickman study showing that lottery winners eventually return to the exact same baseline of happiness as people who were paralyzed in accidents.
Which means the maximizer's quest for perfection is entirely futile. They are burning massive amounts of glucose chasing a high that is biologically guaranteed to fade.
Okay, here's a real-world example of how this plays out for, our listeners. Think about buying a laptop.
Oh, good one.
A satisficer says, I need a laptop with 16 gigs of RAM for under $1,000. They walk into the store, buy the first one that fits, and they are genuinely thrilled.
Done and done.
Right. But a maximizer spends 3 weeks on Reddit, watches 40 YouTube reviews, builds a literal spreadsheet, and buys the absolute best spec on the market.
And then what happens?
For the next 3 years, they are forever haunted by a slightly lighter model they rejected.
I call it the curse of discernment. Maximizers set their expectations impossibly high. And worse, they constantly engage in upward social comparison.
Oh, social media must make that a nightmare.
It does. They aren't just comparing their laptop against the ones they didn't buy. They are comparing their entire life against the perceived perfection of everyone else's choices online. Their reality can literally never match their dopamine-fueled anticipation.
Okay, so the cereal aisle is a biological minefield, and trying to optimize our purchases guarantees we'll be miserable.
Pretty much.
But this obsession with infinite optionality isn't just about consumer goods anymore. It has completely infected how we design our lifestyle.
Especially for the audience listening right now.
It's exactly remote workers, entrepreneurs, digital nomads, and it is leading to a very specific psychological crisis that clinical researcher Jesse Reese calls brownout.
Brownout is a fascinating concept because it's so insidious. I mean, we all know burnout. That is total emotional and physical collapse.
Right, your adrenal system is fried, you can't get out of bed.
Yeah, and we know bore-out, which is being severely understimulated. But brownout is different.
How so?
When you are in a brownout, you are physically present, you are highly performing. To the outside world, you look incredibly successful. But internally, you are hollow, depleted, running entirely on autopilot, and completely disconnected from any sense of purpose.
Wow, and what Reese's research points out is that remote workers are uniquely susceptible to this because they face the ultimate paradox of choice, infinite flexibility.
Yes.
When you can work from your bed, from a cafe in Bali at 2 p.m. or at 2 a.m., you have no structural boundaries. You have to actively decide every single day when to work, where to work, and how to work.
And that causes severe chronic decision fatigue. It's the tyranny of small decisions. If you go back to the glucose in the prefrontal cortex, you are burning your executive function, just deciding whether to answer an email from the couch or the kitchen table.
So by 11 a.m., your brain is just exhausted.
Exhausted. And this boundless freedom has triggered a massive isolation epidemic. Recent data shows 55% of remote workers feel chronically lonely.
55%, that's huge.
The World Health Organization actually compares the biological health hazard of that level of loneliness to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It is a massive physiological stressor.
So we fought so hard to escape the cubicle, and the reward is decision fatigue and the equivalent of a pack-a-day smoking habit.
It's a dark irony, for sure.
So what's the cure? According to Dr. Sarah Chen's behavioral research on CanWork co-working spaces, the solution is something called structured flexibility.
Which is a great concept.
Yeah, it means you still have freedom, but it's freedom within boundaries. It solves the isolation problem by putting you in a Goldilocks zone of social interaction.
Not too much, not too little.
Exactly. You aren't getting dragged into 3-hour mandatory corporate meetings, but you are having 2 or 3 meaningful, low-stakes chats a day by the coffee machine.
And there is deep science behind why this environment works. Going all the way back to 1898, Norman Triplett studied cyclists and found they rode faster when they were around other cyclists.
Even if they weren't racing.
Even if they weren't directly competing or speaking to each other. It's a phenomenon called social facilitation.
Just the presence of others doing the same thing.
Right. Furthermore, environmental psychology shows that the ambient noise of a co-working space, which usually sits right around 70 decibels, creates something called stochastic resonance.
Stochastic resonance, that sounds intense.
It's actually great. It means that moderate level of background noise actually helps the brain filter out distracting information and improves creative cognition.
Oh, so complete silence is actually bad for focus.
Total silence can actually heighten anxiety because your brain is straining to hear threats. 70 decibels is the sweet spot.
But wait, aren't we just recreating the office we tried so hard to escape?
Not quite. Total formless freedom goes against our social biology. But traditional offices bring toxic politics. Working around others in a shared space provides ambient accountability.
Okay, I like that term. Ambient accountability.
Yeah, you don't have a boss breathing down your neck. But when you see other professionals focused on their laptops, your brain's mirror neurons literally fire up and prime you for focused work. It also builds what sociologist Mark Granovetter calls weak tie relationships.
Like the barista who knows your order, or the person you nod to in the hallway every morning.
Exactly. These weak ties give us regular hits of social dopamine. We feel connected and seen, but we don't have the exhausting emotional investment of deep friendships or the stress of heavy office politics.
It's the perfect counterbalance to the isolation of total freedom.
It really is.
Okay, so infinite choice and formless flexibility cause brownout, and structured environments like co-working spaces help fix the flexibility problem. But how do we fix the choice problem itself? Like, how do we stop being paralyzed by our own options in our careers and our daily lives?
The answer seems to be deliberate restriction. We need to become essentialists, and we need to engineer our alignment.
This is where Greg McKeown's philosophy of essentialism becomes so vital.
Yes, the core tenet is doing less, but better. McKeown argues that choice is a responsibility. Not choosing is still a choice. It's just letting someone else or an algorithm decide for you.
Which happens constantly.
Constantly. High performers who are stuck in a brownout are usually acting as reactive firefighters, just putting out whatever urgent email pops up. Essentialism forces you to become an intentional architect of your time.
And to figure out what is actually essential, we can look at Jesse Reese's environmental alignment model, or EAM.
I love this model.
It's brilliant. To recover from brownout, you have to stop looking at just your workload and systematically assess your misalignment across 3 domains: work, home, and self.
Which is much harder than it sounds. You have to ask yourself, are your values genuinely aligned with your current role? Is your home environment a source of recovery, or is it a source of stress?
Have you completely abandoned your physical health in the name of productivity?
Exactly. The EAM framework forces you to map exactly where your psychological energy is leaking.
Okay, but let's make this practical. Once I know my energy is leaking because I have too many choices, what do I actually do?
For everyday choices, like what software to use or trying to pick an Airbnb for a trip, you apply the 5-3-1 framework.
Okay, I want to push back on this one a bit because the rule is you force yourself to limit your options to a maximum of 5 no matter how many exist.
Right.
Then you narrow it down to 3 based on your core criteria. Finally, you pick one by a hard, predetermined deadline.
That's the process.
That sounds great in theory, but ignoring options 6 through 20 feels deeply uncomfortable. How do you fight the anxiety of what if the 6th option was the best one?
That is the loss aversion talking. The way you fight it is by recognizing that the energy you spend looking at options 6 through 20 will ultimately cost you more joy than the marginally better features of option 6 would bring you.
The juice just isn't worth the squeeze.
Exactly. You have to accept that good enough is scientifically proven to make you happier.
Okay, but what about high-stakes choices, like a career pivot or a major move? I can't just 5-3-1 my life's purpose.
No, you can't. For those, you use the RAPID protocol. It stands for recognize, assess, prioritize, impose, and defend.
Okay, walk me through that.
The psychology behind this is fascinating. When you are staring at a massive life choice, your brain is in threat mode. The first step, recognize, is about naming the overload. You literally say, I am biologically overwhelmed right now.
Like separating yourself from the emotion.
Exactly. Then you assess your true priorities and prioritize your top 3 criteria. Everything else is just noise. But the magic happens in the last 2 steps. You impose a strict deadline.
Which forces the prefrontal cortex to act before it runs out of glucose.
Spot on. And finally, you mentally defend your choice afterward.
Mentally defending the choice. Meaning what? Like actively telling myself why I made a good decision.
Yes. You actively remind yourself why this option serves your goals. This isn't just positive thinking. It is a neurological technique to rewire your loss aversion.
Oh, wow.
By focusing intensely on why your choice was the right one, you kill the opportunity cost regret of the paths you didn't take.
That makes a lot of sense. There's also this incredibly vivid concept from positive psychology used in the EAM research. The red cape versus the green cape.
Yes, the superhero analogy.
Right. Think of it like playing defense versus playing offense. The red cape is fighting the bad stuff, stopping the stress, reducing the workload, blocking distracting apps. You're playing defense.
Which is necessary, but not enough.
Exactly. You can't just fight burnout. You also need the green cape. The green cape is playing offense. It's actively building good energy, leaning into your strengths, finding flow, and designing a life you actually want to participate in.
That's a great way to visualize it. If you only wear the red cape, you might stop the burnout, but you'll still be in a brownout because you haven't built any positive alignment.
But wait a second. Isn't this whole philosophy embracing constraints, limiting my options to 5, pre-deciding things? Isn't that just giving up?
How do you mean?
It really sounds like putting on blinders and settling for a mediocre life.
This is the most common pushback, and it's one Barry Schwartz addresses directly. He calls it learning to love constraints.
Loving constraints.
Yeah. It is absolutely not about settling for mediocrity. It is about preserving your cognitive horsepower for the things that actually matter. By deciding to follow a rule like always wearing your seatbelt, or only checking your email twice a day, or eating the same breakfast every morning, you pre-decide.
You completely eliminate the choice.
Exactly. You remove the cognitive burden of choosing in the moment. When you embrace a constraint, you free up your prefrontal cortex.
So you aren't burning your limited glucose on trivial decisions.
Right, which means you have maximum brain power available for the truly essential high-impact decisions in your life. It's not settling, it's optimizing your biology.
Man. So to bring this all home for you listening, we started in the cereal aisle completely paralyzed by 273 boxes of flakes and puffs, our amygdala screaming that we're under attack.
A literal biological trap.
Yeah. We saw how the maximizer's desperate quest for the absolute perfect choice actually guarantees their misery because of opportunity cost. We explored how infinite flexibility in the remote work era leads straight into the hollow autopilot of brownout.
And we found the cure.
We did. The deliberate restriction of essentialism, the structured community of a co-working space, and the willingness to pre-decide the trivial things in life.
It is really about taking back control from an environment that is quite literally designed to overwhelm your biology.
Absolutely. And to help you start that process, we have a quick win straight from the essentialism cheat sheet for you to try this week.
It's a really simple one.
Sometime this week, open your calendar and block off 30 to 60 minutes. No agenda, no phone, no urgent emails. Just block it off purely to think and create some clarity space. Reclaim that time from the trivial many and give it back to the vital few.
It's a small constraint, but it's an incredibly powerful one to start rebuilding that prefrontal capacity.
It really is. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have spent our whole lives being told that having endless options means you have succeeded.
That's the modern dream.
But what if the ultimate modern status symbol isn't having access to every single option in the world? What if true status is having the supreme confidence to ignore almost all of them without a second thought?
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Right. Think about that next time you're sitting on the couch staring at 10,000 movies on your TV. Maybe the biggest flex is just hitting play on the first thing that looks good and actually enjoying it.